Imagine a city where every citizen could stand up, speak their mind, and directly vote on the laws that shape their daily lives. This wasn't some futuristic utopia, but the reality in ancient Athens, over 2,500 years ago. The very idea of democracy, the system that many of us live under today, traces its roots back to this bustling Greek city-state. But the democracy of Athens was something wild, something radically different from our modern systems. It was direct, it was immediate, and it was intensely participatory. Any eligible citizen could walk into the assembly, join the debate, and cast their vote on decisions that affected the entire community, the entire polis. But how did this incredible political experiment come to be? It certainly wasn't a sudden revolution. The journey toward democracy in Athens was a long and rocky road. If we travel back to the early 7th century BCE, we'd find an Athens ruled by a handful of aristocrats. These were wealthy, powerful landowners who made all the decisions, naturally, to protect their own status and privileges. The vast majority of people, farmers struggling with their crops, artisans honing their crafts, merchants trying to make a living, had virtually no say in how their city was run. This deep divide between the rich and the poor, the powerful and the powerless, created a powder keg of social tension and economic inequality. The air was thick with unrest, and the people were hungry for change. The first tremor of that change came from a lawmaker named Draco. His legal codes were the first to be written down, which was a step forward, but they were notoriously harsh. In fact, they were so severe that his name gave us the word draconian, which we still use today to describe something exceptionally cruel. Draco's laws, while brutal, served a purpose. They starkly highlighted just how badly Athens needed a more balanced and just system. The people saw that laws could be made, but they also saw that those laws needed to be fair. Following Draco, a new leader emerged who had truly set Athens on a new path, a respected statesman and a gifted poet. Solon introduced a series of groundbreaking economic and political reforms around 594 BCE. He tackled one of the biggest problems head-on: debt slavery. He cancelled existing debts and made it illegal for anyone to be forced into slavery, because they could unpay what they owed. This was a monumental act that freed countless Athenians. He also restructured the class system, not based purely on birth, but on wealth, which opened up political opportunities for more people. Solon's reforms were truly revolutionary. He didn't create a full democracy, but he planted the seeds. He laid the foundation for a system where citizen participation wasn't just a dream, but a possibility. A few decades later, the seeds Solon planted began to truly blossom. Thanks to a man often called the father of Athenian democracy. Around 508 BCE, he unleashed the most transformative reforms Athens had ever seen. He completely reorganized the political structure of the city. He broke the power of the old, aristocratic clans that had dominated politics for centuries. In their place, he introduced a new system based on local districts called demes. This was a genius move. Suddenly, your political identity was tied to where you lived, not which powerful family you belonged to. Citizens from all walks of life engaged directly in governance at a local level. Cleisthenes also created the Council of 500, a body of citizens who would prepare legislation and oversee the day-to-day functions of the government. And here's the most radical part. These 500 council members were chosen completely by lot, like a lottery. This meant that any eligible citizen, a potter, a farmer, a shipbuilder, had a real chance to serve at the very heart of government. For the first time in history, ordinary citizens weren't just subjects to be ruled. They were active participants in their own governance, on a regular, rotating basis. The power was shifting, dramatically, from the few to the many. So what did this radical democracy look like in action? It was loud, chaotic, and required everyone to show up. Citizens would gather by the thousands on a hillside called the Nix, a huge open-air assembly space with a stunning view of the Acropolis. Here, they would debate everything. Should we go to war? How should we spend public money? Should we build a new temple? Any citizen could take the stage and try to persuade their fellow Athenians. After the debates, they would vote, often by a simple show of hands. This wasn't symbolic. Their votes were the final word. This was the heartbeat of the city. This system even had a unique safety valve called ostracism. Once a year, citizens could vote to banish any individual they believed was becoming too powerful or dangerous to the democracy. They'd write the name on a piece of broken pottery, an ostracon, and if enough votes were cast, that person was exiled for 10 years, without any loss of property. It was a powerful tool to prevent tyranny and protect their political freedom. Now, It's crucial to remember that this democracy was far from perfect by our modern standards. It was deeply exclusive. Women had no political voice whatsoever. The huge population of slaves, who did much of the city's labor, were completely excluded. And metics, the foreign residents, who were often vital to the Athenian economy, were also denied citizenship and the right to vote. So when we talk about Athenian democracy, we're talking about a system for a specific group: free, adult, male citizens. It was a democracy for some, not for all. Despite these significant limitations, what Athens achieved was extraordinary. It set a precedent that would echo through the ages, inspiring political thinkers and revolutionaries for centuries. The story of Athenian democracy isn't just a dry tale of laws and councils. It's a gripping story of human ambition, of bold experimentation, and of a relentless pursuit of a new kind of equality among citizens. The very ideas that were debated in the Agora, the central marketplace of Athens, traveled across time. They influenced the Roman Republic. They were rediscovered during the Renaissance. And they helped shape the foundations of modern republics and democracies all around the world. When we explore this incredible journey, we uncover more than just the origins of a political system. We uncover the very essence of what it means to be an engaged citizen. We see the power of civic responsibility and the amazing potential of political innovation. The story of Athens challenges us. It shows us how ordinary people, when given the chance, could create an extraordinary system of government. It reminds us that the way our world is run isn't set in stone. It's shaped by the choices we make. And the legacy of those ancient Greeks, arguing passionately on a sunny hillside, continues to shape our world today, reminding us of the power that lies in the hands of the people. Thanks for watching. And if you found this journey into the past interesting, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories from history. Have you ever wondered where the idea of rule by the people actually comes from? We hear the word democracy all the time, but its roots stretch back over 2.5 millennia to a single city, ancient Athens. This isn't just a story about politics. It's a dramatic tale of struggle, innovation, and the radical idea that ordinary citizens should have a say in their own destiny. Our journey begins in the early 7th century BCE, in a version of Athens you might not recognize. Back then, Athens was far from a democracy. It was an aristocracy, ruled by a handful of wealthy families who owned most of the land and controlled all the power. If you were an ordinary citizen, a farmer, or a craftsman, you had no voice. Political life was a private club for the elite. This created immense tension. Small farmers often fell into debt to these powerful aristocrats. When they couldn't pay, they lost their land. Worse, many were forced into debt slavery, working for their creditors with no hope of freedom. The city was a powder keg, ready to explode. Something had to change. The first crack in the aristocratic wall appeared around 621 BCE, with a man named Draco. He was tasked with writing down the laws of Athens for the first time. Now, Draco's laws are famous for being incredibly harsh. The term draconian comes from him, after all. But their severity isn't the most important part of the story. For the first time, the law was written down for all to see. Justice was no longer based on the whims of a powerful aristocrat. It was a concrete system that citizens could understand. This was a monumental step towards equality before the law. Just a few decades later, in 594 BCE, another leader emerged who would truly shake the foundations of Athenian society. Solon, elected as the chief magistrate. Solon introduced reforms that were nothing short of revolutionary. He cancelled all outstanding debts, immediately freeing thousands from the nightmare of debt slavery. He then restructured society, not by birth, but by wealth. He created 4 classes based on agricultural output. This might sound undemocratic today, but at the time, it was radical. It meant that a person's political rights were tied to their property, not their noble bloodline. Even the poorest class of citizens gained the right to attend the assembly, the main governing body. Solon also established the Heliaea, a people's court where any citizen could appeal a magistrate's decision. He didn't create a full democracy, but he leveled the playing field and built the stage upon which democracy would later flourish. The final, decisive push towards true democracy came around 508 BCE, with Cleisthenes, often called the father of Athenian democracy. Cleisthenes realized that the old loyalties to powerful clans were holding Athens back. So, he completely reorganized the political landscape. He broke up the traditional tribal groups and created 10 new tribes based on where people lived, not who their ancestors were. These local units, called demes, became the building blocks of civic life. Every citizen was registered in their deme, and this became their primary political identity. Cleisthenes' most brilliant innovation was the Council of 500. This was a group of 500 citizens who set the agenda for the main assembly. And how were they chosen? Not by election, but by lottery. 50 men were selected randomly from each of the 10 tribes every year. This system of random selection, or sortition, was central to Athenian democracy. It prevented corruption, broke the power of the elite, and ensured that any citizen, rich or poor, had a chance to hold public office. Now, every male citizen not only had the right to attend the assembly, but they could also speak, debate, and vote on every law, every declaration of war, and every public expenditure. Power had truly shifted from the few to the many. So what was it like to be a citizen in this new democracy? It was an active, demanding role. Civic engagement wasn't a choice. It was a duty. Citizens would gather on a hill called the Nix, just a short walk from the central marketplace, the Agora here. They would listen to fiery speeches and engage in vigorous debates. Imagine standing there with thousands of your fellow citizens, deciding whether to build a new fleet of warships to face the Persian Empire, or how to fund the construction of the magnificent Parthenon. These were not abstract discussions. Their decisions had immediate, real-world consequences. To protect their democracy from any single individual becoming too powerful, the Athenians invented a unique political tool, ostracism. Once a year, citizens could vote by scratching a name onto a piece of broken pottery, called an ostracon. If any one person received at least 6,000 votes, they were exiled from the city for 10 years. It wasn't a punishment for a crime, but a political safeguard to prevent the rise of a tyrant. It was a powerful reminder that in Athens, the collective will of the people was supreme. It's important to understand that Athenian democracy was a direct democracy. Unlike our modern representative systems where we elect people to vote for us, every eligible Athenian citizen voted on laws themselves. They also served on massive juries, sometimes with 500 or more members, ensuring that legal judgments reflected the community's values. To participate effectively, education was key. The arts of rhetoric, public speaking, and philosophy were highly prized. Great leaders like Pericles, who guided Athens through its golden age, constantly reminded citizens of their moral duty to be informed, engaged, and dedicated to the public good. However, we must also acknowledge the significant limitations of this system. Athenian democracy was far from inclusive by our standards. Women had no political rights. The large population of slaves, who powered the Athenian economy, were completely excluded, and resident foreigners, known as metics, even if they lived in Athens for generations, and contributed to its prosperity, could not become citizens. In reality, only about 10 to 20% of the total population adult males, born to Athenian parents, could actually participate. It was a democracy for a privileged few. Despite its flaws, the Athenian experiment was revolutionary. For the first time in history, a major state was governed on the principle of political equality among its citizens. This idea sent shockwaves through the ancient world and beyond. Philosophers like Plato and Aristotle spent their lives analyzing its strengths and weaknesses, creating a body of political thought that would influence Western civilization for centuries. The Roman Republic borrowed some of its principles, and thousands of years later, Enlightenment thinkers and the founders of modern nations looked back to Athens as a foundational model for their own democratic aspirations. Let's picture the city itself. Ancient Athens was physically designed for democracy. The Acropolis stood as the sacred heart of the city, but the Agora was its civic and commercial pulse. This bustling open space was where citizens met, traded goods, and discussed politics. And just nearby, the Nix provided the open-air auditorium for the assembly. The very layout of the city encouraged and enabled participation. This democracy was tested time and again. It faced devastating wars, like the Peloponnesian War against Sparta, internal political strife, and economic crises. Yet, for nearly 2 centuries, it endured, proving that a government of the people could be both resilient and successful. The legacy of Athens isn't just a historical footnote. It's a living inheritance of ideas. It teaches us that power is not a birthright of the few, but a shared responsibility of the many. It reminds us that an active, informed citizenry is the ultimate safeguard of freedom. While our own democracies are vastly different, more complex, and more inclusive, the core questions the Athenians grappled with are the same ones we face today. How do we ensure fairness? How do we balance individual liberty with the common good? And how do we empower every person to have a voice in shaping their own future? The story of Athenian democracy is the beginning of that long, and still unfinished, conversation. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this journey back in time interesting, Please hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the ideas that shaped our world. Let us know in the comments what other historical topics you'd like to explore. See you next time. Ever wondered where the idea of power to the people really came from? It's a concept we take for granted today, but its roots stretch back thousands of years to a single bustling city in ancient Greece, Athens. This is the story of how democracy was born, not in a single flash of brilliance, but through centuries of struggle, reform, and a revolutionary belief that ordinary citizens could, and should, govern themselves. Our journey begins in the 7th century BC. Athens wasn't a shining beacon of freedom back then. It was a society teetering on the edge of chaos, ruled by a powerful aristocracy. Wealth and land were concentrated in the hands of a few noble families, while the majority of citizens, mostly small farmers, were drowning in debt. Imagine living in a world where a bad harvest could mean not just hunger, but being sold into slavery to pay off your debts. Tensions were at a boiling point. The common people, the demos, were ready to revolt. The first attempt to bring order came around 621 BC with a man named Draco. You've probably heard the term draconian to describe harsh laws. And well, that's his legacy. Draco was tasked with writing down the laws for the first time. A huge step forward because it meant the law was now public knowledge, not a secret weapon of the rich. However, his laws were famously severe. The penalty for almost everything, from stealing a cabbage to murder, was death. While this was brutal, it established a crucial principle. The law applied to everyone, rich or poor. It was a small, bloody step, but it was a step away from arbitrary rule. But Draco's laws didn't solve the underlying economic crisis. The rich were still getting richer, and the poor were still losing their land and their freedom. Civil war seemed inevitable. Into this volatile situation stepped a man who would change everything, Solon. Around 594 BC, Solon, a respected aristocrat, poet, and merchant, was given extraordinary powers to reform the state. He was Athens' last hope. Solon's reforms were radical and brilliant. First, he tackled the debt crisis head-on, with a measure called the civic, or the shaking off of burdens. He cancelled all existing debts, freed those who had been enslaved for debt, and made it illegal for anyone to be enslaved for debt in the future. This was a monumental act that saved countless families from ruin and restored a sense of fairness. He then reformed the economy, encouraging the cultivation of olives and grapes for export and standardizing weights and measures to boost trade. But Solon didn't stop there. He knew that economic justice was meaningless without political power. So he restructured Athenian society. Instead of basing political rights on birth, he based them on wealth. He divided citizens into 4 classes based on their agricultural output. While the top 2 classes could hold the highest offices, even the poorest class, the thetes, were given the right to attend and vote in the assembly, the main governing body. This was revolutionary. For the first time, every citizen, no matter how poor, had a voice in the decisions that shaped their lives. Solon laid the foundation. He didn't create a full democracy, but he gave the citizens the tools and the power to start building one. He balanced the system, preventing both mob rule and tyranny. After Solon, Athens went through a period of turbulence, including the rise of a popular tyrant named Cleisthenes. While he ruled as a tyrant, he surprisingly upheld many of Solon's reforms and further empowered the common people, weakening the old aristocracy. His sons, however, were not as benevolent, and their rule ended in assassination and exile. This chaotic period created a power vacuum and set the stage for the final, decisive step towards democracy. Enter Cleisthenes, the man often called the father of Athenian democracy. Around 508 BC, Cleisthenes unleashed a set of reforms so ingenious, they completely rewired the political DNA of Athens. Here's how he did it. He ignored the 4 traditional tribes and instead divided all citizens into 10 new tribes. But these tribes were not based on where you lived or who your family was. Each tribe was a cross-section of Athenian society, made up of citizens from the 3 main regions: the city, the coast, and the inland plains. Think of it like a political draft, ensuring each team had a mix of players from different backgrounds. This brilliant move shattered old allegiances and forced citizens to think of themselves not as members of a clan or a region, but as Athenians. Loyalty shifted from the family to the city-state, to the polis. From these 10 tribes, Cleisthenes created the Council of 500. Each year, 50 men were chosen by lot from each tribe to serve on this council. The council set the agenda for the assembly, managed state finances, and handled foreign affairs. The use of the lot was a profoundly democratic idea. It assumed that any citizen was capable of holding public office and prevented a professional political class from emerging. It was civic duty, not a career. The assembly, or ecclesia, was the heart of the democracy. All male citizens over 18 were eligible to attend, speak and vote on everything from laws and treaties to decisions about war and peace. Imagine a gathering of thousands of citizens in an open-air amphitheater, debating the future of their city. This was direct democracy in action. It was messy, it was loud, but it was governance by the people. To safeguard this new system from any single individual becoming too powerful, Cleisthenes introduced one of history's most fascinating political tools, ostracism. Once a year, citizens could vote to exile any politician for 10 years, without any specific charge. If any one person received more than 6,000 votes, they were banished. It was a political safety valve, a way for the people to remove a perceived threat to democracy before they could become a tyrant. Slaves, who made up a significant portion of the population, were property, and foreign-born residents, the metics, couldn't become citizens. So when we talk about the people, we're talking about a specific group, free, adult, Athenian-born men. Despite these flaws, what they created was extraordinary. It fostered a culture of participation and civic duty. Citizens were expected to be involved. They served on juries, in the council, in the army, and in the assembly. This active engagement was supported by an emphasis on education and rhetoric. To be an effective citizen, you needed to be informed, you needed to think critically, and you needed to be able to persuade your fellow citizens. This is why great philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, as well as playwrights and historians, flourished in Athens. They were all part of this vibrant public conversation about justice, ethics, and the best way to live together. The Athenian experiment proved that a state could be run, not by a king or a small group of nobles, but by the collective wisdom of its citizens. It showed that, when ordinary people are given responsibility, they can rise to the occasion. The principles they established: citizen participation, accountability of leaders, rule of law, and free and open debate became the bedrock of Western political thought. The legacy of Athens echoed through the centuries. The Roman Republic adapted some of its ideas. Renaissance thinkers rediscovered Athenian texts. Enlightenment philosophers like Rousseau and Locke drew inspiration from it when they imagined new forms of government. The founders of the United States and the revolutionaries in France looked to Athens as a model, a powerful example of a government of the people, by the people, for the people. But Athens also offers us a warning. Direct democracy can be volatile. It's susceptible to silver-tongued demagogues who can sway the crowd with emotional appeals rather than rational arguments. The assembly could be fickle, making rash decisions, like the disastrous Sicilian expedition during the Peloponnesian War, which crippled Athens. It reminds us that democracy isn't a perfect, self-sustaining machine. It's a living, breathing practice that requires constant vigilance, education, and commitment from its citizens. So, when we look back at the story of Draco, Solon, and Cleisthenes, we see more than just a history lesson. We see the birth of an idea that continues to shape our world. The journey of Athens shows us that democracy is not a destination, but a process and ongoing struggle to balance freedom and order, individual rights and the common good. They didn't perfect it, but they dared to try. They built a system that valued debate over dictate, and the power of the many over the few. Their courage and their vision lit a torch that has been passed down through generations, reminding us that the power to shape our society ultimately rests in our own hands. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the origins of democracy. If you found this journey into the past insightful, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. We've got so many more stories from history that reveal how we got to where we are today. See you in the next one.